Welcome back to How to Ruin Your Marriage Week.
It's our sneaky way of helping you not to ruin your marriage, but
Well, if you know how to ruin it, then hopefully you'll know how to help it. And in this podcast, we're going to talk about the psychological ways. So we'll talk about psychological warfare. But ask yourself a question. What is it in your background, in your development? Because when I think of psychology, I think of it's how you think and what you grew up in that sets the template for who you are.
Yeah.
And what is it in your background that may be interfering with you having the best relationship possible?
So we started off in the last episode talking about how this is not our first marriage, and we learned a lot. And fortunately for us, we have a really strong marriage. We communicate really well. We realize, you're the yin to my yang, like you're the grounding force. I'm a little intense. But knowing those things is really important. What I figured out the first time around when I didn't do it right, when I first went, I wouldn't commit to you because I didn't trust myself, and I thought I'm never going through that again. And I figured if I couldn't figure it out the first time, I'm certainly not going to do this again, right? And I went through a lot of therapy actually before I would commit to a relationship and moving forward, which I think was really smart. Now I know it hurt. I know it drove you crazy and made you insane for a while, but it was a smart thing to do.
Holding on to hurts from the past will ruin your relationship.
It's one of the things you need to know.
And it took me a while to get over you coming and going, but I'm over it.
But it was a necessary thing for me.
But holding on to things is not helpful.
No.
And one of the things that really helped me is that I knew what it was like to be pressured.
So you thought about it from my point of view.
Relationship that I wasn't quite ready for, and so I gave you space.
Right.
And then yes, it is true. I called you a black widow because you would eat men.
No.
And now you are the black widow that's actually guarding the cage
I'm guarding
of
the
our
cage.
house.
So one thing I want to point out, though, is that when I first started doing therapy, I remember being angry, and bitter about the other person and what he did. And then all of a sudden it shifted and it went to personal responsibility. And it was, okay, I can't control that. Let it go. What was my part? Because that's the only part that I can take with me into another relationship, if I want to have this relationship with this amazing person and I don't want to mess it up, that's the only thing I can focus on was my part. What can I do differently? And that's when it shifted. That's when it changed. And that's a really important factor. I mean, I don't know. What do you think?
So from a psychological standpoint, responsibility is probably the most important thing. What is it I can do today to make the relationship better?
Because if you're a victim, you can't.
If I think about my first marriage, I was angry and almost justified in not being nice because of some
we can always tell ourselves that
difficulties that were going on. But was that helpful?
No.
It was not helpful. So I work on this with my patients all the time, but that means I work on it with myself. What's my goal? So you need to know what's your goal in the relationship.
You want to be divorced or you want to be married and have a loving marriage?
I have a very clear goal, and it's always been the same with Tana. I want because I'm a kind person. I want kindness in my life. I want a kind, caring, loving, supportive, passionate relationship. I always want that. And so it's important. What do you want in your relationship? And then does my behavior, not hers, does my behavior get me what I want? And that is a frontal lobe function.
It is.
So it's a brain function, but it's from a software point of view. It's a psychological strategy. Know what you want and then ask yourself, does my behavior get me what I want? And it's not selfish because what I want is not selfish.
No.
It's good for both of us.
Right. What I love about what you said, here's what's super important about that. What you said is you focus on what you want and you behave that way. And let me tell you why that's so important. Because there are times, okay, let's just face it. We have PMS, we have menopause, whatever. We've got kids,
do not.
we have bad days, right? But because you do not know, but all of our problems start with men. Do you see that? Menopause, anyways, menstruation, anyways. So the reason it's so important, what you said, what I love about that. So if I'm having a bad day, and I'm just irritable, whether it's hormonal, whether it's situational, whatever the reason, it doesn't matter what the reason is. If I'm having a really bad day and I snap at you and you're not clear about that goal and you snap back and we now engage, right? Because you weren't clear about that goal, we engage. And you're justified. In your head, you're justified.
Justified.
So now we're engaged in this fight and we can't sort of end it. Now we have to dig in and make our positions correct, right? But because you were clear about your goal, this actually happens now and then. So once in a while. So I'll snap, you stay grounded. You actually stay centered and focused on what it is you want. You say something kind instead. Rather than me needing to dig in and make myself right about what I said, I feel like an idiot actually. So then I realize how nice you are and I must apologize. Does that make sense?
Right. Well, you have the same goal.
Right.
You have the same goal.
But rather than digging in, that causes me to put my guard down. So
I
love what
know.
Byron Katie says. Defense is the first act of war.
And I know that I can make you angry
Oh, you
in
can.
under 8 seconds.
Fortunately, you don't do it often.
But why would I want to do that unless I was conflict driven?
Right.
So a lot of my ADD patients are conflict driven. They play this game called Let's Have a Problem. But why would I do that unless I was not thoughtful?
Right.
And all of you listening, I really want you to do this exercise. It's in virtually all of my books called The One-Page Miracle. On one piece of paper, write down what you want and ask yourself, does my behavior get me what I want? And if it doesn't, then don't do it. It's not going to help you.
Yeah. And you get to be a role model and an example. Another thing I love about you. You are a role model and an example when you do that, and it makes me want to be a better person. Hopefully I do some of those things that make you want to be a better person, and that's important in a relationship.
I'm so happy being married to you.
Me too.
I would be so sad if you went away.
Don't say that.
I would. Honestly, I'd
I know,
be
but
super
let's not
sad,
focus
which
on
is
that.
like, so what's really important? Me being right,
Right.
me being
Or happy.
in control. And we talked about, what are those experiences growing up? And I grew up with a dad that
Needed to be right.
He was the king
Right.
at home. Nobody argued
Absolutely.
with him.
He was the patriarch.
And so I grew up with really what has become an outdated model of the man is in charge.
Yeah.
And if I took that into our marriage, we would
Oh, that would not go well. But one thing,
man is
I grew
in
up,
charge. And so I have to check myself because my goal is never to dominate you. My
That's
goal
probably
is
a
to
good
be
goal,
your
never to-
partner. If I had that goal, you would not be my partner.
So one thing,
Because you're beautiful and you're smart, but you're also strong-willed and
Yeah.
you have red hair.
yeah. And red hair is God's warning signal. One thing that I learned from my
I
mom.
didn't say that. She did.
So I grew up in a pretty chaotic environment, but one thing that my mom taught me that I have never forgotten was because I was pretty strong-willed even as a kid, right? So I was timid as a little kid, then I became strong-willed over time. And she used to say to me, I had this sort of righteous thing that my daughter has now. And she used to say this one thing to me, and I've taught it to my daughter because it's a really important thing. You can be right and you can be dead right. Is being right the most important thing in this situation? And it just never, I was like, what?
Yeah, like, are you the kind of partner that if your partner says something that's just factually wrong, that you have to correct them? It's like, I try not to correct people
Well, I do
unless it's material to the situation.
Okay, I do
if
admit-
it just doesn't matter, leave it alone.
Well, I do
You're
admit,
not
I
the
told you
English
so.
teacher.
Yeah, but I do admit I told you so is a problem for
Oh
me.
my goodness.
No, I'm addicted to I told you so. That is I'm admitting it. So it's just an issue for me. Thank God you just laugh at me and walk away. So, yeah. So yeah, I admitted it.
Forgiveness falls under this psychological circle. Holding on to things from the past can really devastate your relationships. So listen to our podcast on forgiveness. When we come back, we're going to talk about the social ways you
And
screw up your relationship.
Don't forget to tell us the one thing you've learned. Please go to brainwarriorswaypodcast.com. Let us know what you've learned, what you want to hear about. And if you are so inclined, please, we're asking, leave us a review. Thank you. If you're enjoying the Brain Warriors Way podcast, please don't forget to subscribe so you'll always know when there's a new episode. And while you're at it, feel free to give us a review or 5-star rating, as that helps others find the podcast.
If you're interested in coming to Amen Clinics, use the code PODCAST10 to get a 10% discount on a full evaluation at amenclinics.com. For more information, give us a call at 855-978-1363.